and fire them as long as they will.
Next came the P-51s of the 354th Fighter Group. The 354th arrived in England at the end of November 1943 and began flying combat in December.
When I first went over, not too long after that, we were searching for a name for the group, and we got together as a group and decided on the Pioneer Mustang group because we were the first ones over there.
Able to outmaneuver, outclimb, and outdive every Luftwaffe fighter then deployed, the P-51 proved to be the sword that would slay the Luftwaffe. Soon other units either converted to the P-51 or arrived from the States with the new aircraft. As more and more Mustangs appeared over Germany, the Luftwaffe suffered higher and higher losses. By war's end, 9 of the 8th Air Force's 10 fighter groups were flying Mustangs. The first 6 months of 1944 saw the tide turn permanently against the defenders of the Reich. With the American bombers now supported by swarms of fighters, the Luftwaffe interceptors took to picking off stragglers, bombers who had been hit and had fallen out of formation. Killing the cripples was generally the easiest way to shoot down an American bomber. When not preying on the cripples, the defenders of the Reich had to fall back on fast hit-and-run raids through the weak spots in the American escort screen. They would have time for one pass through the bomber boxes, then they'd dive out of the fight, hoping to live to fly another day. Problem was, there weren't many living to fight another day.
The P-51s, they were escorting P-17s, and that's my P-17, the tail gunner. Well, I didn't even feel it. I just saw the blood running down, and then I felt it. There was this bullet sticking here. No? I still got it.
During the first 5 months of 1944, the Luftwaffe's fighter force defending Germany lost almost 100% of its planes and pilots. An average German 190 or 109 pilot by this point in the war lived less than 30 days in combat.
For them it was almost like committing suicide when they were ordered to get up and fly a few missions. Nobody had any enthusiasm anymore to, I think they were all envious of us that we didn't have to do it. But as long as you are in the military, you take orders and you do what you're told. But we noticed if 12 planes went up, there were always 3, 4 that came down again. They found mechanical trouble, so they didn't have to fly.
Men who survived 4 or 5 combat missions were considered the grizzled old veterans. In fact, by the summer of 1944, the Luftwaffe's remaining fighter units were almost universally composed of green-as-grass pilots fresh out of flight school, led by a small core group of Experten, long-time aces who did their best to teach the newcomers how to survive. But as the war dragged on through the fall of 1944, more and more of Germany's Experten were being killed while attacking the American bomber streams. With its fighter units on their last legs, the Luftwaffe pinned its hopes on a new wonder weapon, the Messerschmitt 262. As the world's first jet fighter, the Me-262 was supposed to revolutionize the air war over Europe and wrest control of the skies away from the Allies one final time. Powered by two Junkers Jumo turbojet engines, the Me-262 could reach 540 miles per hour, over 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter then deployed. With its four 30-millimeter cannon, it could tear apart a bomber with a single short burst. And with a wingspan of 40 feet and a length of 34 feet, it was as small a target as most single-engine fighters.
It was a fighting airplane. It was a good airplane. It was a comparably small design. The span was small. The airplane itself was narrow. So it was a size to cope with most of the defense requirements. A small picture of the airplane is harder to shoot at, and especially if that can move fast enough.
Though the Luftwaffe hoped the 262 would be its savior, the new jet fighter had too many problems to be an effective answer to the Allied bombing campaign. Plagued with material shortages, production of the 262 was delayed several months so that it did not see much action until the fall of 1944.
The first one I flew in September 44. You had a guy sitting on the wing and then the cockpit open, and he explained to you what this all is, and then explained what the speed is to take off and what the approach speed is, and said, now go. But he never had to see this.
The Messerschmitt 262 was truly a revolutionary aircraft, but like all revolutionary aircraft, it had some major problems with it. And these were problems that really could not be ironed out given the conditions that Germany found itself in the final stages of World War II. Most importantly, they were running out of raw materials that would go into making the engines. So they were forced to substitute different metals into the engines, which led to turbofan blades breaking and other things like that. The engines were really the weak point in the 262. If you jammed the throttles forward too quickly, they would catch fire. If you abused the engines in any way, they would catch fire. And in the fighter groups, they lasted only a few missions before they had to be replaced. There were lots and lots of little bugs, technical problems that afflicted the Messerschmitt 262 program from the beginning and were never ironed out, which is one of the reasons why you never see Messerschmitt 262s flying around now, because they're so dangerous to fly. You know, you see 51s flying around, you see Messerschmitt 109s flying. Nobody flies 262s. They're dangerous aircraft. Another major issue was the fact that there weren't any trained pilots to fly the Messerschmitt 262 in training commands. So the pilots that were going into units like Commando Novotny or JG-7, they didn't know how to fly these aircraft. They were revolutionary. They had never experienced anything like it. So it took time to train them, and there wasn't time. There wasn't time, and they didn't receive the training. And so overall, the Messerschmitt 262 was a failure operationally. They lost probably at least as many Messerschmitt 262s in the operational units as they shot down enemy aircraft.
There were tremendous losses involved in the pilot training, and the pilots themselves. The pilots were poorly brought up to facing a war environment. They were not using the airplane to the advantage it had offered initially.
The engines were so